How are the Pacers potentially thinking with the trade deadline approaching this week? Who could be moved? How do their finances play into all of this? The great Nate Duncan is going to join us to break it all down today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Sunday/Monday, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes, and today it's trade deadline week. Luka's already been moved. Anthony Davis has been moved, and there is much to discuss with the Pacers. Where do they go now? What do their finances mean in all this? Who could they move? What should they possibly be thinking about additions? And so much more. Well, thankfully, Nate Duncan, who podcasts the deepest NBA content out there and gets into the cap all the time, is going to join us to break all that down today. 30 minutes of chatter about the Pacers, what they could be thinking, and how they should be approaching this deadline. Talk about a lot of players. I will tell you this. If you are a Bennedict Mathurin fan, you are not going to enjoy Nate's takes today. But we have a lot we get to, covered a lot of ground. Every angle of the Pacers trade deadline with Nate Duncan. Let's just hop right in. Trade deadline is almost here, and who better to talk about it than the person who got me into podcasting when I was in college so long ago? How about that? It's Nate Duncan from Dunc'd On. Nate, what do you think about this Pacers team as they barrel towards a very different trade deadline than last year for them?
Well, thank you for that compliment first. I didn't realize that was the case, but glad I was able to get you started. That's really awesome. Yeah, this Pacers team, I thought maybe when they were 10 and 15, we could be going in a different direction here and that they may need some sort of a reset. Of course, a lot of that was compiled without Andrew Nembhard. Now he's back. And so the dominant theme, in addition to maybe what they could use more of, maybe a better forward, is the finances of this group going forward. And so that's the biggest thing that I'm focused on with respect to Myles Turner's free agency, and then maybe also how they could afford that if indeed his market were to be kind of in the range of some of the better non-all-star centers that we've seen.
Yeah, I've been fortunate that between Claxton and Porzingis and Allen and Brook Lopez and Isaiah Hartenstein, that the center market has seemed pretty set the last couple of years in terms of what it's going to cost for that level of player. But between him and Mathurin and upcoming raises for other guys, like they have so much financial reality to think about that clouds kind of everything they would do. Even if they did a trade of 2-for-1 that they need to do at some point, a consolidation trade, that would probably be somewhat financially motivated because of the upcoming tax concerns that they have. If they trade away somebody for a lesser player at a lesser salary, obviously that's financially motivated. If they salary dump someone, which we'll get to later, like everything they could do, yes, it would make sense for them to be a better team maybe this year and beyond, but a lot of it would be financially motivated to me. I mean, how would you try to approach that from a trade deadline perspective as the Pacers? Do you feel like they need to cut money right now? I mean, they are pretty good. They could be in fourth by the end of this weekend. How would you go about that part of it?
So I don't believe that they need to cut money right now. They're slightly under the tax. They can just continue to ride this group out. Like I was saying, they could maybe use another forward with a little bit more versatility. I'm not sure that Jarris Walker is your backup 3 or Mathurin is your backup 3 as if there's an injury or something like that, I think could be an issue. But I think the greater thing is more looking at the long-term books and how you're going to deal with that. Because I'm sure you've told your listeners this, but essentially the Pacers for next year, I'll double confirm it here, they project to be about $19 million under the tax with 11 players for next year. And if they were to fill out the roster with 14 players, they only have 12 million under the tax. And that doesn't include the potential free agency of Myles Turner. And Myles Turner, no matter what you think of him, will be getting more than $12 million. So that's what they're having to deal with going forward. If that were the sole concern, I still don't think you need to make a move now. Because, there are some obvious guys that you could move on from. Mathurin would be one. Obi Toppin would be another. TJ McConnell would be another. Maybe just make Nembhard the backup point guard. And they definitely have players that they could move on from. Maybe a couple of like Toppin, you might say, is a little overpaid, but I don't think he's like such a toxic contract. Although it's a little more difficult because he makes slightly more than the. Let me see it.
Just this year, he makes more than the MLE. Every next year,
yeah. But actually, next year he would not. He actually, by our projections, the MLE next year will be 14.1, and he makes 14. But he does have some incentives. But if he doesn't hit those this year, his cap number I think would be low.
Nate, he's not going to hit those.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I haven't been tracking exactly what those are. So, in any of, are they like defensive player of the year or something like ridiculous?
I don't know that, for like sure, Jordan, but I believe half of it is Finals MVP. So, yeah. You never know.
Oh man, that's they'd probably be happy to pay him if that turned out. Right. So he could possibly be movable in the offseason. I don't know that you'd even have to give him a first. And if you moved on from him, you probably would have enough to just keep this team together with Turner. So if the money were the sole consideration, I say you just continue to roll through with this group. Certainly you would investigate obtaining another forward and seeing if you could move someone to do that. But the other issue that I see is in the long term, not only Turner, who I think it would be insane to not pay him this offseason, although you don't know what his leverage would be because there aren't many teams with cap room. But I would feel comfortable going into the offseason with him and just working out what it needs to be there. And we can talk more about what that would be. The greater thing that I see is just that because you've now paid Andrew Nembhard, you don't really have room to give Mathurin an extension, nor do I necessarily think that for this particular team, Mathurin is a guy I'd want to give a big extension to, or that he's a great fit with this group. So that's the biggest thing that I would be trying to do right now is, while he still has this patina of being a young player with a lot of potential, I would be looking to move him and see if I could bring back another rotation player.
Yeah, their financial cliff isn't necessarily just this year or next year, although next year it's certainly likely coming. It's that then if Mathurin comes up, like all their players that they've paid will still be under contract at that time, and they'll be almost a second apron team if they keep both of those at what I would consider even close to market value, right, 2 years from now. And they're not going to do that, right? Like, unless they're so amazing early next season, there's just absolutely no way that happens. And so then it becomes, that you nailed it with Turner to me. Like, they're not going to not keep Myles Turner so they can keep some of their bench guys. Like, they just move on from someone else financially to do that. And he fits better with Siakam, Haliburton than just about any other big at his talent level. Like, there are obviously better players who fit, but that's what makes him and lots of guys on this team. They fit well in the Pacers system, probably better than they would on most other teams, which is good for the Pacers until they have to figure out how they're going to structure the salary thing going forward. And maybe next year they say, hey, the tax is a little less punitive, but then they'll see what Phoenix and Boston is doing. Go, well, that's a lot of money we could be getting if we get under that tax number. Yeah. So it's certainly something they'll have to think about. And you mentioned Myles, and I think you just kind of answered this. So I'll go first and then ask you. But unless they're getting a center back, he keeps being in all these trade talks. Like, why would they even humor this, right? Unless they're so scared of his next deal, which unless Detroit does something funky, I can't imagine any team having the overlap of having enough cap space for Turner and needing a center. Unless you're really scared of his next number or think he's going to fall off a cliff from an effectiveness standpoint, it doesn't make any sense to me that they would just sell him unless they're getting another center back. And I can't even think of what that trade would look like. So I can't imagine that they do much outside of that very niche scenario. What would you be doing with him?
Yeah, I think that would be what my approach as well. Now, I do have some concerns with how Turner has fallen off defensively some over the last few years. Like, he's not the great force that he was, I would say, 2 or 3 years ago as a rim protector, but he's become a very good shooter. He still is passable defensively. And maybe they could get a better defensive center, but part of why I loved the Siakam deal for them was because he fits so well with Siakam. He allows Siakam to be the main rim runner, and then Turner can trail the play in transition where they're so good, or he allows Siakam to push in transition and then he can be the trailer, or he allows Siakam to get into the post, run pick and roll with Haliburton, get a switch, go to work there, get those quick duck-ins with spacing. It really has been a beautiful fit. You've seen how Siakam is playing some of his most efficient ball of his career now in Indiana, just made the All-Star team again. So that fit is really, really good. I think Turner is very much core to their identity. And while I do think there is something to be said that this is a group where if you have a center who has some athleticism, is a decent pick and roll player, like you've seen what Thomas Bryant has been able to do, who was acquired for basically the absolute minimum anyone could be acquired for, like a second round pick swap, I think it was. So now, and then, yeah, if somebody had a crazy amount of cap space and was going to give Myles Turner $35 million a year, then, and over 4 years, maybe you would balk at that, right? Like maybe there's a team that for whom we don't care how bad that contract is on the end. We think Myles Turner can help us win a championship this year. We're going to offer him that, but there isn't a cap space team that's in that position where that would make sense. So I would very much feel comfortable going into the offseason with full bird rights with him. And yeah, you know what? If you have to pay $30 million, then maybe the question becomes, how long is that for? Maybe you make it for fewer dollars and more years, or you can kind of play with that a little bit. Because as you noted, that market value, the Nets and the Raptors didn't really do the Pacers many favors with some of these contracts for centers who are nowhere near as good as Myles Turner. But I still think he's so core to what they're doing that it's just too difficult to bring in a replacement who would be good.
I agree. I think 3 years might end up being the sweet spot of average annual value in like the summer that lines them up with Siakam, could help them get it down in the first year. And Nate, let me toss this idea to you so you have it in your brain heading into the summer. Okay. No trade clause eligible if they need to get those annual dollars down for a year. Myles Turner.
Oh man. No, that after the saga that the Suns are going through at deal, I don't think that they would go in that direction. But yeah, there are not many guys who are that happens. So you make a good point, because you can only get a no trade clause when you're a free agent. You can't get it, as you know, of course, if you get an extension, and most guys extend these days.
Everybody, short little break here so we can talk about Gametime. Looking for tickets to your next big event, whether it's a concert, a comedy show, or a sports game. Finding the right ticket at the right price can be a headache, but with Gametime Picks, it's never been easier. Let me tell you how it works. With Gametime Picks, the app does all the hard work for you, curates the best deals, so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. You can use it for anything. Coming to a Pacers game, coming anywhere. I went to see the Dallas Wings play the New York Liberty in the Barclays Center. It was perfect. The curated deals on Gametime make it simple to find great tickets at a great price. You can grab those for prime seats. They have a seat view feature on the app that's a game changer. And the best part, with their lowest price guarantee on Gametime, if you find a better deal elsewhere, you'll get a 110% refund on the difference. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time. Easy cancellation policies if something comes up. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Myles, no one deserves a no trade clause more than someone who's in every trade or transaction cycle ever than Myles Turner. So perhaps how would we go on with our lives not talking about him every year?
Yeah. He took a year off last year, but now he's back. But yeah, it's especially because he's about to be a free agent. Like if there were 4 teams with cap space this year, then I might be a little bit more concerned about it. But like the reality is there just aren't very many players like him, even like that play passable defense at the center position, can work as both a roll man and a pop man or a spacer on offense like that. It's just so many teams would be desperate to have it. I guess here's the one trade that I'll throw out to you. I'd be interested to know what your thoughts are on this. This would be maybe buying a distressed asset because this player is shooting 19% from 3 this year. But let's say the Magic were like, we can't hit a shot. We're the worst 3-point shooting team in 15 years. We would trade Wendell Carter Jr. for Myles Turner. He's let's see, is he under contract for 1 or 2 more years?
Carter has an extension. I think it's even longer, right?
Carter is under contract. Yes, that's right. He did just extend. Yeah. So he's under contract for like 3 more years after this one with a team option after that. So that may be, and he's only under contract for 10 next year, and then it goes up to 18 or so the next 3 years after that. and he's 26. That sort of a deal. I mean, you're clearly getting a worse player now, but you get the long-term finances under control a little. Now, I don't know if the Magic can afford another $30 million contract going forward either, but like that's the only one where I think of someone who could reasonably be available. But yeah, trading one position for the same position generally, especially among two teams that are like sort of contenders, at least a little bit in the East, it's just not the sort of thing that usually happens, right?
The last center one I can think of is Mason Plumlee, Yusuf Nurkic with Portland and Denver forever ago, right? Like it is.
Yeah, that's a great pull.
Ago. You know, that
was a great pull.
I have, in fact, looked into center for center trades to do this. But yeah, Wendell Carter's come up in like a Cap Dorky group chat I'm in of like, oh, this is a good deal. Like if someone needs this, and hey, if you're a tax strapped team like the Pacers,
well, not how he's playing this year though, right? Like you'd be buying low. You'd have to, and
he was their third best center, right?
Yeah,
I think.
Well, yeah, with Mo Wagner before
when Mo was healthy,
yeah, maybe so. But I mean, then the question becomes, like, maybe you would do that as the Pacers if you could get something, right? Maybe that's worth it if the Magic would throw in their 2025 first to do that. But then again, you throw in the contract situation. Yeah, Carter's a worse player, but his contract situation is a lot better than Turner. You don't have to pay him anytime soon. So I'm not even sure people would say that Myles Turner on expiring is a better asset than Wendell Carter Jr. going forward. So that would be an interesting one. Yeah, I'm not really sure. I don't think anybody's interested in like the return of Goga Batadze, for example.
No one maybe less than Goga specifically also.
Greg Foster, actually. Maybe would Greg Foster be the least interested? He's not still there, is he?
No. That is perhaps your best pitch that you keep up closely with every team is that you can come on a Pacers podcast and toss out their assistant coach who got in a spat with Goga Batadze.
That was during the Bjorkgren era, wasn't it?
Yes, and we were sitting in our COVID media seats way off the floor, and we could still hear, hey, something's happening down there. Uh-oh. Flash from the past.
All right, what else we got to talk about here?
Yeah, well, to that end, like, I agree with you that them being under the tax means they're not right this second under the tax means they're not under pressure to make a move right now, but they will at some point presumably have to cut money. I mean, what to you would be the right time for that? Because that has to come up if they're doing meetings about money right now and trades they would make. And it seems like the answer is next season at some point, because if it's Mathurin and then or Turner and then Mathurin the next year, they got to do it kind of soon. And so, yeah, they could go into the season over the tax next year, but then everybody knows your financial reality, which is going to be the case for lots of teams this year. I kind of feel like it's the summer, but you kind of want to get ahead of it. Like, I think that's the biggest thing then for them to think about as they approach transaction cycles is when and how are they going to do this?
Yeah, it has to occur either now or over the summer, you would think. Yeah, I think it's fine to go $3 million into the tax or so. Like that's okay to start next year, but you can't be 12 million over. Like that's just too difficult to deal with. And even with, again, as you noted, the tax structure is kinder to those who go a little bit in and harsher to those once you get over 15 million into the tax. So financially, maybe it could be done, but yeah, that's just not the history of this franchise. And I don't know that there's even really a need to do that with the group that they have. So unless they could really get a high level of starter at the 3 is probably the only way I would look to do that. But to me, it's really more like, I think they can very easily do that. Like McConnell, I'm sure someone would just take him this offseason. They might even be able to get like a couple of seconds for him or something like that. Or Mathurin, I'm not sure what his value is as well. But Mathurin would, of course, fit into any team's mid-level trade exception even now. You could even save some money for this year if you want to. Ideally, you would get back an expiring contract who could also play, but it would be someone who wanted to get a look at him and possibly pay him. That's the other thing, too, for Mathurin is if you're trading for him, you don't want to trade for him in the offseason, and now you're immediately having to go into extension talks
like
with having no idea how he fits on your team. So to me, and then also my prediction is that Mathurin, particularly with Neesmith back now, is going to be more de-emphasized, and that once they get into the playoffs, he's not going to be a massive contributor for them. I could be wrong on that, of course, but I think the emergence of Nembhard and the need to hold on to him, to me, makes it so Mathurin is superfluous. And I don't see a way in which Mathurin becomes a better player than Nembhard, particularly given Nembhard's versatility to play some point guard as well. So I would be looking to move Mathurin right now. I mean, I really have no idea what's out there. I have to really think about who he would be a good fit for, because he still kind of profiles as more of a sixth man, but maybe there's a team that likes his upside some. So but I don't think that his value will be higher in the summer than it is now. And he doesn't fit here long term. I don't think that they really need him other than the odd explosive performance off the bench. Like, there's a good offensive team. They got plenty of guys to give the ball to. So that would be my focus, is moving him and probably taking nothing back for next year. And if you do that, you're relatively close probably to where you need to be to re-sign Turner.
So you mentioned next year's tax rules. That change does nothing to me if they still don't get the revenue sharing from the tax teams. Like, that's not enough of an incentive to me, you know?
No, I agree.
You need to get this is a Pacer show. I don't want to get too far into this, but it needs to be like less payments and you will get like half or something like that. I think that would make it more, because even still next year, if the Pacers payment is less, like the difference between having Toppin and not is going to end up being like $36+ million in total. Like, that is way too big, even if they're trying to reduce the penalties. That is a conversation for another day. I agree with that. And Mathurin has, since they, post NBA Cup run for the Pacers this year, when they started playing well in mid-December, he has really finally started to fit in a way that he never did before, as in quicker catch and shoot threes, better team defense. That starting lineup with him has been tremendous, which has been kind of what they've wanted to see from him. But the blend of what he can be and what he is always what they've been chasing. And that is sometimes hard to do on a team that plays a very specific, unique kind of way that certain skills fit into. He's definitely a guy that wants to catch and read the play, or knows when he knows his shot is coming, he's way more effective than someone who has to like freestyle. So it's not that he's a bad fit necessarily, but it's different than a lot of other players on the team. And then when extension time comes, like, are you paying him to be the guy that he's been? Are you paying him to be the guy he hopes to be? Like, that's a lot of range. I don't even know what contract comp I would use. I keep like lightly saying Jalen Green, but that's way too high for what he's shown so far. So it's really hard to imagine where not that he's not potentially going to be very good. Guys with his free throw rate at his age do always turn out to be pretty solid players, but it's just harder with him than other players to see what the fit is financially and on the floor, even though I understand why they might say, we want to see him in the postseason, right? The two teams they played in the playoffs last year were two teams that he would have helped them or three teams, I guess. The first two rounds teams that they played against are teams that he's historically done great against, because they had very few strong perimeter defenders, and he defended well against. He's like their best Giannis defender last season, not anymore. So there are some ways where I can see them saying, we want to see him on that stage before making the decision. But then, they get into the Giddey situation in the summer where his value would be a lot less because of what you said. If any other team wants him, they know they have to extend him right away. One more break here, guys, so we can talk about PrizePicks. Basketball season is heating up, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports with over 10 million members and billions in awarded winnings. PrizePicks makes it easy and fun to turn your sports knowledge into real money. Here's how it works. Just pick more or less on at least two player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. This week, looking at the board, selecting more for Jason Tatum potentially on points after a game winner he just had, or more for Luka Doncic on assists once he returns for the Lakers. The best part, PrizePicks keeps it simple. You can set up your lineup in less than 60 seconds, and with their fast, secure withdrawals means you get paid quickly when you win. Plus, their Taco Tuesday promo gives you discounted player projections, even more value. So check out the promos tab to tail any of the super sweet Millie winners, big game lineups, and more. If you tell a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of $1 million promo funds. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup on PrizePicks. Run your game.
Well, and I guess that ultimately is do you agree with me that it's got to be either him or Nembhard?
Probably. Just because of the position, you mean, like how many guards or perimeter guys they have?
Well, because like Mathurin can't really play the 3. I don't think. I mean, maybe feel free to correct me if you think I'm wrong. on that one. Like if you think he can be,
you'd have to guard wings
defender
better
against wings.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like,
not yet.
I definitely think that Nesmith is a better fit there, even with his foul problems. I know he's been hurt a lot of the year, and it'd be nice to have someone backing up Nesmith, considering that he's not reliable game to game because of the way he gets in foul trouble. But I mean, maybe you can say that we believe in Mathurin so much as we want to put the ball back in Tyrese's hands more, that Nembhard doesn't have as much value to us. We have McConnell still, although at some point TJ McConnell is going to fall off a little bit. And I do, going up against a real good playoff defense, I do wonder how effective McConnell can be.
You don't think he can be a top 10 isolation player well into his 30s? Come on.
I mean, certainly, I will give TJ credit for this, that at pretty much every turn of his career, he has surprised me and been more effective than I thought he could be, except some of those Sixers teams when they were just not guarding him at all. But that's the big thing for me, is just what is it going to look like in the future? And for Mathurin, like, he's had some better games lately. Like 3-point rate has been up lately, as well as you noted, he's been just playing a little faster, fitting in a little bit more. So if you're going to make him your starting two, what does that look like next to Haliburton and Siakam? And I think Nembhard is still better than him defensively, guarding the ball. Like, you need someone in your base lineups who can guard the ball. I don't know that that's Mathurin either. And I just wonder what another team is thinking about. Like, you bring him in to be your starting two. He's starting to show signs maybe that he can shoot well enough as an off-ball player. And he is like relatively rugged for a two if he's not your main guy guarding the ball. So I do think he would have more value to another team. But the other thing you could say is, well, hey, maybe Nembhard just has so much trade value that it would just make sense to explore that instead and just hold on to Mathurin as our starting two. But they're playing so well, I don't think I would want to go there.
And trading Nembhard on a minimum is not worth it to them, I would think. I would think you'd want the salary slot when it's higher, just because of the options that would create for you. But
it would. I mean, I don't know that they've explored this at all. Maybe they would have if they continued playing poorly. But certainly you can get more for Nembhard now, because all of these teams, like the Suns, would desperately use Nembhard, right? Like, I'm sure that they would trade all three of those firsts that they got to get Andrew Nembhard. I would think that they would do that. Those are bad.
I will never guess what the Phoenix Suns are going to do or can do ever again.
Right, but there, I think, because there are teams that just have no way of acquiring someone, or like you could probably get the Bucks 2031 unprotected first for him just because he would fit into their salary structure now, and then get the raise up to 18 next year, where it's a lot harder for these teams to match salary going forward. But that's. Again, I just like, he's a really valuable player for them. Like, you don't want to take a step back on the floor this year when I think they have a pretty decent chance of making some noise in the playoffs again this season.
They could have home court advantage. They're a half game out as we're speaking, right? Like, they're that close. Boring question, and then we can get you out of here. I was reading this in Dan Feldman's Daily Dunks, which actually got me really thinking about this. There are lots of teams that might want to shed a little bit of money this year for various reasons. They're close to the tax line. They're just expensive in general. They're over the tax, right? And so on one hand, we've seen historically, including last year when Robin Lopez was just randomly traded from the Bucks to the Kings, that like, if you need to shed a minimum, you can do it. Someone will help make it possible with a fake second, cash, whatever. On the other hand, if there's a lot of teams trying to do it, it might be slightly more challenging than normal. I only say this for the Pacers because some breathing room could let them do 10 days, could let them convert somebody earlier in the season. Like, their two-way guys have run up a bunch of games when they were hurt early in the season. Do you think there will be a too high price for them to dump Wiseman or money? Like, that's what I feel like their most likely trade honestly is just dumping cash to get off of that. But it might end up being too expensive if too many teams are trying to get off of money this year.
I don't think that'll be the case, especially because he's on a minimum and any team can just take him that has a roster spot. I think they should be able to do that. Okay, if that's the direction that they want to go. I mean, maybe the price will be too high because, as we've noted, they don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like, they're deep enough that I don't think, like, would it be great to maybe bring in like one more guy as a center? I suppose so, right? I don't know how well Bryant's going to be able to play in the postseason as well, though then maybe you just go Toppin and Siakam like they did at times last year too. And Jackson obviously is out for the year. Maybe they just want to hold on to him, although I doubt they would give him a qualifying offer. You still have his birthday.
No, he would take that immediately.
Bring him back. Yeah, I think he probably should do that. So even though it'll be lower because he won't have made the starter criteria.
Just missed it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just missed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it can probably happen. It just depends how much they really like. If they have a target in the buyout market that they really think would be good, I'd say, yeah, do it. If you know what you want to do and there is someone like to pay that price, like just getting off a minimum shouldn't be that hard. But then if they're just like, maybe someone might come free or whatever in the future just to be easier, then I think you just don't bother doing it.
I honestly think they'd have to decide like what % chance Enrique Freeman being their third or fourth center on a conversion would help them in any way this year on a long, cheap deal, because that would be why I think you explore it. Because I think right now I have the earliest date they could do it with their current distance from the tax as March 20th. And that's after the two-way signing deadline. Not that 15 days like so matters. It's changing their whole season and structure. But if they could do it earlier, I mean, Wiseman's totally dead money, right? And so I at least think they'd explore it.
Yeah, it is tough going into the playoffs with basically 3 completely dead roster spots in Jackson, Wiseman, and of course James Johnson.
Whoa! That is not a dead roster.
There's an altercation.
I was gonna say. I still wonder to this day, like him pulling Obi Toppin out of a beef in Game 6 against the Bucks. Toppin gets 1 tech instead of ejected. What if that wins them the series? Like that's worth a minimum contract. This was the last one I sent you, as short as you can do it. Any targets that you've heard is available that actually make sense to the Pacers to you?
Caleb Martin would be one that I think would make a lot of sense for them. Very reasonable contract. Maybe he could compete with Nesmith as the starting 3 if he were shooting well enough, or just get into the mix as a backup forward. Now, what would it take to get him? If it's a first, we know that they're kind of out those going forward because of the Siakam deal. Wouldn't make sense to trade, say, a 2028 first, even if it's protected, to get him. Would I think about trading Ben Mathurin for Caleb Martin, and maybe you could get a little something back as well from the Sixers if they wanted to maybe do a little bit of reset and get another guy into their program? I don't know what they think of him, but yeah, I'll put it this way. It wouldn't take a first for me to get back Martin for Mathurin. Now, I might be in the minority there because it feels like Mathurin has a better market there, or perhaps that there just is more stuff around the league that you could get for him than Caleb Martin and a first. And if that's the case, obviously I would say go in that direction. If you get any kind of first for him, I'd rather do that than Martin. You could always flip it for something later. But that would be the player. Kelly Oubre would be another one too. I think he's a good transition player. Doesn't shoot it amazingly well. That's the problem with either of those guys. Oubre might be more available than Martin just because he's a free agent going forward. But that sort of a player. Just give me one more guy to throw into the wing mix who's competent and has a little bit of size, and that we think we could put on. We could throw him on Jalen Brunson. We could throw him on Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown and not get killed.
Yeah, that's about what I would think too. Like contractually, Jayshawn Tate's the only name that I'm like, maybe they could squint and talk themselves into that, but that's
he doesn't. He's another 4 though, right? Like he can't play. He
can't shoot well enough to play the 3.
Honestly.
Yeah. And they have a lot of
shoots well enough to play 3. So
they already have a lot of level shooters anyway. Nate, this was great. Thank you for the time. I'm sure many people already know, but where can people find you? What you have to do and say every single day, and listen to the mock trade deadline, which I finally finished today.
Oh, awesome! It's actually at you can just look me up on either X or Blue Sky at Nate Duncan NBA, and you can get a link to everything that we're doing. But we have a subscription podcast service called Dunc'd On Prime that has a lot of awesome stuff that you've been kind enough to reference already. So I won't repeat it. So thanks for having me, Tony.
Thanks everybody for listening. We'll catch you soon.